güzel bir birlikte Karen olacak. In the second part, we will be together with Karen, so I want to give my words to her.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity for coming along and talking to you about HR initiatives that are implemented in a project management approach. I have, like Graham, been in HR for about 30 years now, which sounds scary when you say that. It makes me feel very old. But, so I have had the privilege of working in a number of organisations, both public sector and private sector, from a HR perspective. And project management has been an integral part of being able to successfully achieve some of the HR initiatives. So I'm going to talk to you for about 20 minutes and then offer the opportunity at the end to ask any questions that you may have.
I think which one?
Have I broken it?
Could be a very quick presentation.
to the medium of mine.
Yes.
I think. Yeah, next time the SWOT presentations.
I certainly can't deliver yours.
Do you know any joke? That was a joke.
I'm really sorry, no, I'm not good at jokes.
Pause, pause.
I could maybe sing, but then I would empty the room very quickly.
No, it's interesting.
Karaoke.
A good one. See if it works. Yeah.
Okay,
right. Okay, so HR initiatives implemented as in-house projects. So if I look at first, initially, at the type and the nature of projects that actually I've experienced in my couple of years now at WIG. Then you can see that I'm not going to go through all of those. There are a large number of projects. And they'll give you some example of the type of projects that we've actually been involved in at WIG. And some of them vary from fairly simple through to very complex projects. Yeah, so if I look at the corporate website, which Graham and I worked on together, that was very complex in that it involved hundreds of stakeholders who all had a vested interest in what the content looked like, how it was designed, what photography we used, what images we used, etc. So with lots of people, all who wanted to say in what happened, to something much more, much simpler in terms of some of the development programs where there was an obvious need within the organisation. The stakeholders actually wanted an intervention, therefore it's a much easier project to be able to deliver. In terms of the nature of the projects, if we look at the types of projects conducted within HR from an in-house perspective, the subject matter varied, obviously, as we've seen on the last slide, in terms of how we rewarded people through to actually how we portrayed ourselves on a corporate website. But I think the nature is around the focus on continuous improvement in terms of what we do and actually creating a platform on which we can promote our business successfully. The positive impact in terms of both upon the business and current and future employees. So everything that we do from a HR perspective is about ensuring that we are able to attract the best people, but also to retain the best people in our organisation. So it's always with that focus in mind. And also the ability to influence our industry sector. So we work quite closely from a HR perspective, but also across all of our other disciplines with specialist groups that look at making sure we try to be at the forefront in terms of any of the initiatives that we actually implement within the organisation. And that particular one there, we definitely, something that Graham has definitely championed, is seeking to lead in our field is something called FCAS, so that's working in foreign conflict-affected states, and that's I guess our USP, our unique selling point in terms of going into, I guess, war-torn zones where other organisations wouldn't go. In terms of our project management approach, and I'm talking from a HR perspective, so please, this is not from an expert project managers that I have in the room. This is in terms of looking at it from a HR perspective and in terms of how we go about implementing the projects. So, first and foremost, it is about ensuring that the HR projects are delivered on time, within the budget that we set, and to the required quality standard, and that obviously varies depending on the nature and the type of project that you're working with. The core elements for me are around the analysis, so actually, you know, what does all of the data, the statistics and the information tell us about, you know, perhaps if and what we need to do in terms of making a change in the organisation, and therefore from a project perspective actually what we do. And then moving into, from a planning perspective, what are the I guess the key milestones along the journey from starting the project right the way through to actually finishing. And in terms of, I think, having structured a plan together is making sure that we actually execute that plan. It's very easy to have a great plan, you know, and you've got all your milestones and you understand who the owners are and who's accountable, but actually if you don't execute the plan, then you know, the plan doesn't mean anything. The action, this is about actually making sure that from a perspective of understanding what are our priorities and what are the urgencies in terms of the specific project. So they may change obviously as you're going through the life of that project. So yeah, it may be more urgent to prioritise a different area to the one that you're focusing on currently. So obviously constantly changing, and I guess being flexible in terms of actually how you approach. So as an example, if we look at an acquisition that we might have made and the people integration of that acquisition, you may think, having done some due diligence, that the size of the problem is this and this is what we're dealing with, but actually the size of the problem is significantly different when you start to do the digging and delving and then truly understand, you know, having completed some more due diligence, what the issues are. So contractually it could be much more complex than you'd anticipated, and therefore being flexible and being able to adapt your approach is obviously really important. And I guess as well from project management, it's about understanding when to flex and when to stick to the plan. And it is a difficult one, and obviously seeking help from stakeholders and obviously those around you in terms of trying to make those decisions are obviously important. The deliverables and outcomes for me are critically important in terms of agreeing right up front with the stakeholders what those look like, so that you understand what success looks like, you know, what good looks like when you get to the end of the project, and you know whether or not you've actually delivered what's required. So your deliverables and outcomes are critically important. Sponsors and stakeholders for me are what I'm working with every day, day in, day out, whether it's a project, a task, an activity. You know, we are an in-house service, and it's obviously important to ensure that we're delivering to stakeholders' needs. A sponsor for a particular project, so if I think about because Graham's here, the corporate website project, Graham was the sponsor for the project. And I think having a sponsor that is a real advocate for that project, and in times of difficulty will stand up and champion that project and help you get through difficulties is really important. And also one that's also a critical friend in terms of who can question and challenge and push and probe to make sure that the project's going in the right direction, and maybe asking questions that you haven't possibly thought about yourself. Stakeholders, extremely important, and I think you ignore stakeholders at your peril as an in-house service delivery. They vary in terms of, you have all levels of stakeholders in HR, so from members of staff who have an opinion, right the way through to senior members of the organisation, you know, the directors, the board, who also have an opinion, and you're trying to pull all of that together to basically get individuals to agree what the approach is and the direction that we're going to go in as an organisation. Communication, communication, communication is probably the most important aspect of managing a project from a HR perspective, and I'm sure any other type of project. If you're not regularly communicating what's happening in the project, things that are going well, things that aren't going so well, then you know the project is probably on a downward trajectory. And the quality of the people that are working on the project are also really important, so making sure you've got people with the skills and the capability to be able to deliver the project with you is also really important. And I think individuals that actually take ownership and accountability. The one thing in my experience about projects within HR, from my experience, is you really need individuals who are very committed, because at times it means working in a lot of extra hours, you know, maybe evenings, weekends, etc., to make sure something is delivered. And I'm sure you've all been involved in projects where that's been a requirement. So what were the challenges? And I'm talking generally here, but I can talk specifically about any of the initiatives because there are always challenges internally or externally on projects. So what were some of them? I think in terms of a large one is the resistance to change. So people get in their comfort zones and they like the way that they're working now. They don't necessarily want to change in terms of, you know, the way they're working. They're very comfortable and therefore they don't want to do things differently. So, and I think the relinquishing